briefly mentioned that with the difference between bikepacking and bicycle touring means the bike setup is often a little different. And while there is no rules on which bike you have to use, choosing a bike and having it set up in a way that you are comfortable riding on is the most important thing here. You can ride any bike on any trail in theory, but setting up a bike that is suitable for the adventures that you are planning is important, not only for the enjoyment of the trip, but safety of the trip. Not to mention riding a bike that is not suitable for the trails you are riding and braking every 5 minutes isn't going to be a very enjoyable one. I think the number one mistake I see when people pack their bikes for bikepacking is the location they are packing their gear. So often I see a bike loaded to the brim on the rear wheel. The key to packing your bike is to keep the load evenly spread out throughout the bike. You don't want to have the rear carrying everything and you don't want the front to be carrying everything. The weight should be spread evenly across the bike. Doing this will ensure the bike handles more naturally. Will reduce the risk of damaging your bike by not overloading one area, and will have the added benefit of helping keeping your gear organised and easier to access. The UK trails changing day by day. The two most important things to make sure are correct is tyre choice and gearing. Starting with the tyres, you will want something fast rolling but with good puncture protection. Although you can definitely bike pack without a tubeless setup, I do think it is worth the setup, especially if you are thinking of going on more bikepacking adventures in the future. If you don't want to use a tubeless setup, then using tyre liners or simply taping the inner side of the tyre can provide protection from most UK thorns. With UK bikepacking routes using a multitude of different types of trails, I think it's best to use a cross-country tyre or a gravel bike tyre. I'd recommend using the largest tyre that your bike can take, but still leaving enough tyre clearance for when you encounter the muddy trails. For the gravel bike users, I think the sweet spot for most UK bikepacking routes is around 45 to 50mm tyres. And on the mountain bike side, anywhere from 2.1 to 2.6 inches is probably the sweet spot. The gearing you choose for the bike will play a crucial role in determining how many hills you hike versus how many you pedal. As mentioned, the terrain in the UK varies greatly depending on the region. Some areas are flat as a pancake, others are rolling countryside, and some are incredibly hilly with steep climbs. That's why getting your gearing right is essential. The ideal gearing setup will differ for each rider based on their fitness level and cycling ability, the specific goals of your bikepacking adventure. However, a good rule of thumb is to opt for the lower, which is the easier gears, rather than the higher, which is the harder ones. It's better to have an easier climbing gear you rarely use than struggle with the gears low enough for tougher climbs. Easier gearing will be more useful than harder gearing when bikepacking in the UK. Having the right setup for the trails is essential for a successful bikepacking adventure in the UK, but knowing how to maintain your bike and understanding how it works is just as important. The golden rule of any bikepacking journey, no matter how great your bike is that it's not if it will break, it's when. A solid understanding of your bike's mechanics will give you the best chance of fixing anything that goes wrong. When setting up your bikepacking rig, consider how easy is it to repair or replace parts while on the trail. If you cannot fix it on the trail, think about whether the nearest bike shop will also be able to do so. While there are many great no-name brands out there nowadays that work well for everyday use, if their parts aren't easily replaceable or repairable, they may not be the best choice for bikepacking. It's all about maximizing your chances of continuing your journey. Knowing that your bike is fitted with reliable, readily available parts will give you peace of mind. Which brings me on to what tools you need to carry while on a bikepacking adventure. The good news is that the UK is fairly small, and while you can be in remote places, you are normally within around 20 miles or so of somewhere. But you still need to carry some basic tools to keep you rolling. The must-have tools are going to be a good multi-tool, which you will be able to use for tightening and adjusting when needed. Ideally, the multi-tool would have a chain breaker tool, but having one separate is fine also. Tire levers, tire boots, and even if you are riding tubeless, at least 2 inner tubes. A spare quick link to put your chain back together is also a must. You can link a chain back together without this, but since after I think around 10 speed, it doesn't really work, as you are likely to find it breaking again. And a spare rear mech hanger is also a good choice, and definitely a set of brake pads. The trails in the UK can eat brake pads for breakfast. A good pump, and of course some form of lubrication for the chain, and maybe a rag to give the chain a little wipe down from time to time. Some form of strong tape and cable ties are a good idea also. That would be the bare minimum you should probably carry in regard to bike maintenance and fixing. But you can go further, of course. A spare set of jockey wheels, a spare gear or brake cable, spokes, even a chain. The list can really be endless, and it's all about weighing up the likelihood of the things that are most likely to need fixing or replacing. For example, spare spokes is an interesting one for me. Carrying a spare spoke is not a bad idea, but it's often overlooked that to replace a spoke can mean you will need to also carry a chain whip tool as well as a chain cassette locking tool just to remove and replace an old spoke. This isn't always necessary, of course, but can be the case depending on how a wheel is built. That spoke you are carrying now requires multiple other bigger, heavier tools. In some parts of the world, this is of course worth it, but in the UK, you are normally within some reasonable distance to find somewhere to get help. Now that you have your bike set up, it's packed up with all the gear you think you will need for your trip. The next really important thing you need to do is called a shakedown ride. A shakedown ride is a great way to not only test out that your bike is working as it should and feels good to ride. Remember, after adding all your gear to the bike, it will feel different, and the shakedown ride will give you a good chance to get used to how the bike rides and help make changes before you go on the real adventure. Here are some things to know about a shakedown ride. A great idea with a shakedown ride is to make it an overnighter. Making it an overnighter will give you an idea how your setup will work for you. You will get a chance to unpack the bike at night and pack it up in the morning. This will help you decide if you have the bike packed up how you like it. Get off-road and get over some rougher trails. The shakedown ride should replicate as much as possible of a bikepacking adventure that you are planning on going on. It's not only testing your bike is working, but also that nothing is going to fall off and nothing is going to become loose. The idea of a shakedown ride is to help you find out what works and doesn't work in a more controlled environment, where if it all goes wrong, you can just bail and go home. Get back to the drawing board. It shouldn't be a big epic adventure. It really is to allow you to test and understand how everything will work together.